everything about this is wrong. You know it, and I know it. For Mikey McCoy to put the phone to his ear. Now, why is that precise timing so important? Because there's no dialing. Mikey didn't have time to dial. And there is no way you are going to convince me and the rest of the world that all of this is normal.
Candace Owens returned with a bang today, revealing possible foreknowledge by someone close to Charlie Kirk of his assassination. And in this clip, she gets into the details concerning this. And let's just say it raises more questions in a story that already raised a lot of questions. Let's see what she says. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
It's now been 47 days since my friend Charlie Kirk was executed in front of the world, because that's what it was, a public execution. And call me crazy. Many people do. But I was so clearly deluded in the immediate aftermath of his death that I was operating under this function. I mean, I truly believed that I would be fighting for answers to what actually happened on 9/10 alongside Charlie's inner circle. I thought the band maybe was going to get back together. We were all going to maybe be on a group chat. Me, Tyler Boyer, Andrew Colvett, Stacey Sheridan even. If you're wondering who Stacey Sheridan is, by the way, she's the one who's holding the camera when Charlie's casket is being escorted off of Air Force Two. She's like the chief money person, essentially, at Turning Point USA. She was brought in to reel in the big donors. I remember exactly when that happened. All of those people, by the way, were actually brought in by Tyler Boyer. He's a very important character in the story, but we're going to get into all of that tomorrow. The point that I'm making here is that I had assumed, clearly wrongly, that we'd all maybe be on a group chat communicating, raising hell and demanding answers from the feds, from the police, from the White House even. Certainly, at the very least, pointing out the very many holes in this story.
Yeah, sure seems like it, but at the same time, it seems like a lot of people close to Charlie Kirk were more interested in trying to make him into some pro-Israeli martyr at the very end, even though basically 48 hours before his death, he had tweeted to a group chat of some of those people that were pro-Zionist, like Josh Hammer and like Rob McCoy, that he had no choice but to, quote, leave the pro-Israel movement. The pro-Israel cause is actually what he said. So instead of actually abiding by what he said in his decision-making for his organization, people like Josh Hammer tried to twist his legacy in the direction that Josh Hammer wanted, and used it to try to sell his book along the way, right? Talking about that in the major interviews that he got after Charlie Kirk's murder. That's what happened, not what Candace wanted. The whole gang trying to solve this and poke holes in the FBI's absurd narrative. No, a lot of people close to Charlie didn't seem to be interested in that.
And if any one of us had the audacity or the desire to carry on Charlie Kirk's show, that would be the appropriate venue for asking those sorts of questions. But no, I was wrong. Silence. Silence is what we were met with. In fact, I am told that these people believe the official narrative. Lone shooter. No one else involved. Just a crazy guy with too many pronouns in his bio. Hey, 1963 called and they want their narrative back. All that's missing from the story is a grassy knoll, right? Just need a grassy knoll. Anyways, back at headquarters, I am told it's business as usual. And it's kind of giving me like, I don't know, LBJ when he gets sworn in that famous picture. Unfortunately, sworn in. Unfortunately, of course, he's sad in this photo. Gosh, he's obviously not wanting to be the president of the United States. JFK was shot and killed. And now LBJ has to step up, unfortunately. But I got to be honest, I wasn't there. I don't think LBJ was actually that upset. I don't know why. Vibes. The vibes just aren't vibing for me in that picture. But maybe he was.
Well, Johnson certainly wasn't as adversarial toward the Israel lobby as Kennedy was. Kennedy wanted the AZC to register under FARA. That was the precursor to AIPAC. That's what AIPAC originally started as, the American Zionist Council. And Kennedy wanted, Ben-Gurion to basically be subject to U.S. inspections in the Dimona project, in which Israel stole nukes from the United States. None of those two things were followed up upon. But I will say, in regard to this, a lot of Americans actually did generally buy in to the lone nut assassination theory of Lee Harvey Oswald, and there was nothing approaching the independent media that we have now that existed back then to kind of throw wrenches in the FBI story here and the CIA connections. A lot of those things crept up in the years afterward, and in this case we haven't had that much time for many of the connections to possibly build and stones to be unturned and uncovered here. So I just want to be fair to say that, you know, many people might open their eyes to that if more connections are made, more things come from investigations like Candace's.
The truth is that LBJ simply, to use an expression, had his wits about him. And JFK had a plan. Like in the event that he had been horrifically assassinated in front of the world, JFK maybe had a succession plan. Now, if these terms I'm using here sound familiar to you, it's because they should sound familiar. It's the exact terminology that was utilized by Pastor Rob McCoy just 4 days after Charlie was murdered. In front of his congregation, he spoke about Charlie's succession plan that he was somehow privy to. I don't know why, but he knew 4 days later and announced to the world that Charlie indeed had a plan. Take a listen.
Everyone's worried about the leadership of TPUSA. Don't. He was wise enough at 31 to put together a plan for succession. It's very clear what they decided, and they're implementing it now.
Amazing. I mean, amazing. So on September 14th, we were made aware of this succession plan, and I find that to be fascinating. The people who didn't even know Charlie all around the world seem to be fighting harder for him, fighting harder for truth. And it is, in fact, thanks to people on the internet like Sam Parker, James Lee, Ian Carroll, Zeb Boykin, many others, that a video from September 10th has gone pretty viral, okay?
Before we check that out, I just want to give some word on presidential succession. She talks about the parallels between a succession plan. It wasn't Kennedy that actually drew that up. It was the U.S. Constitution that specifically says in the presidential succession clause that the vice president, in the event of the death of the president, that he can't fulfill the terms of his office, takes on the responsibilities of the president. It doesn't explicitly say they become president, so this was kind of a political circus to some extent when William Henry Harrison died of pneumonia. John Tyler became president, declaring himself as such and assuming the office of the presidency as if he wasn't an acting president. But that didn't get codified into law to mean specifically you'd take over until the enactment and ratification of the 25th Amendment in, I believe, 1967. So just want to be clear, it wasn't Kennedy that drew up this succession plan in his case, but let's take a look at this video.
So let's take a look at this. It's a video of course, Pastor Rob McCoy's son. His name is Mike McCoy. And you're going to see what he does, not in the seconds following Charlie getting shot, but in less than 1 second after Charlie gets shot. These are not seconds, less than 1 second. You're going to watch what Michael McCoy does. First, let's hear his daddy's version of the events. Take it away, Pastor McCoy.
As a father, I want to protect my son. And I thought, I got a plan for you, son. He said, Dad, that's not Charlie's plan. And you know what? I'm looking at my son who's 24 years old. Justin's the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and Mikey's the Chief of Staff. And I'm watching, the minute Charlie was shot, he called me, says, Dad, Charlie's been shot in the neck. Please call every pastor and pray. I said, okay, son. He has wits about him. He was just directing. He had blood all over him. And
did he think that we wouldn't see that footage, that footage hadn't been passed all throughout the world prior to this? I think this was recorded a few days after Charlie Kirk's death, in which clearly Mike McCoy is not covered with blood. there'd be no evidence of that other than to contradict those allegations. So this seems weird to me. If he's going to go forward and say that he was covered in blood, despite no blood being on him, despite the fact that it looked like from the footage he was wearing like a gray or white shirt, to say this is just disingenuous, and that raises eyebrows unless you were somehow mistaken on that. But why would you say that, knowing that the whole world could disprove that from the footage that had already been circulating like crazy on the internet in the days after Kirk's death?
Two things I want you to remember here. You may not have caught that, but he said, I was watching. And the minute Charlie got shot, he called, and Mikey McCoy says to his dad, Charlie's been shot, pray for him. He says the minute, maybe he's being a little hyperbolic. We're going to find out. I'd certainly like to find out. But he stops himself. He says, I was watching. Watching what exactly? What were you watching? I want to remember that. It's rubbing me the wrong way. And I'm going to tell you why that's rubbing me the wrong way in a little bit. But the bigger thing is that he says Mikey had blood all over him. Except Mikey did not have blood anywhere near him because Mikey was behind the tent when Charlie got shot. And Mikey, in less than a second, does something that I find to be quite strange. He puts his phone to his ear and he begins a conversation. So we're going to watch that clip in its entirety. Mark is going to bring it in. So we decided to slow this clip down, and we're going to watch this clip slow down so you can see that it is exactly 834 milliseconds from the time that you hear the shot. That is how long it takes for Mikey McCoy to put the phone to his ear. Now, why is that precise timing so important? Because there's no dialing. Mikey didn't have time to dial, okay? You can't dial and put your phone to an ear in 0.834 seconds. The next time that you're going to see Mikey McCoy, as we just showed you, is in just under 2.5 seconds on the other side of the tent. He's on a phone call. So we can track Mikey, but let's watch the clip again in milliseconds so you really grasp how quickly this transpires. So when this clip was brought... There we go. We're tracking that. Yeah, when the clip was brought to my attention, I obviously have a file, I have a big folder of files of every angle, and I decided to track Mikey from every angle available to see, like, maybe we just missed it, and he did at some point put that phone down, dial a number, speed dial, hold down one. I don't know. Maybe we missed it because that seems automatic, right? 0.834. That seems pretty quick.
It does seem pretty quick, and man, this raises my eyebrows. There's been some things in Candace's, investigation of the Charlie Kirk assassination I think have been, more red herring oriented. Things like the text messages, because of how easily it would be to disprove the notion that the feds, meddled or hacked or altered or modified the conversations through defensive subpoena power. But other things like, good old decoy George Zinn or stuff like this really does raise my eyebrows. Now, this is an immediate grip of his phone, putting it up to his ear as if he's immediately on a conversation. So either it seems like he was on a conversation prior to that somehow and just waiting for a moment to talk, in which that would raise the most eyebrows, right? Like waiting for something to happen to confirm something. Or if I'm to steel man this in the most, the most genuine way I could to try to show, one possible reason for this, it's that they use the Siri capability on their iPhone or the Google Assistant on Google to dial without having to pick up the phone, take a look at their contact list, select the name, and select the dialing. And when I saw this video, I thought, could that happen? Would someone do that? And some people would do that. I don't think that's a very common way of using your phone, but it is possible on modern smartphones. And just to do that, I plugged in a test contact into my phone called Charlie Test, and I'll just demonstrate this right now. If I have my phone right here, I could conceivably do this. Notwithstanding the fact that it's like 0.8 seconds after this shot, this would be possible if I just went like this. Siri, call Charlie Test.
Do you want to use...
And it would do that. It would try to call that contact, and you could use the phone app to do it. You know, you could say that to your iPhone and it would start dialing. Now, is this likely? No, actually, I don't think most people do tend to use their phones this way. Is it possible? Yeah, you could do this, and we haven't heard an explanation from Mike McCoy as to what this was. Was this, you know, picking up to say call 911 and that would be, you know, the firing point to call? Was it his father who referenced him calling immediately after Charlie Kirk's death? We don't know. I will say it's possible, but I think it's mostly unlikely unless we get some information from the guy that did this. But it does raise eyebrows.
And no, he doesn't do that. We even have him in front of Charlie's car when Charlie is brought to the car, the waiting car rather. He is still on the phone, and I can show you the clip of that. Take a look at this. Don't worry, we'll slow it down for you. See him in the background with the backpack. It's Mikey McCoy. Okay. So what are we to make of that? The only logical conclusion that I can come up with, and many others, because I've pressed, I said, play devil's advocate. I want you to advocate for Mikey McCoy. I want you to play lawyer, and you are representing your client, Mikey McCoy. What was he do? How did he do it this quickly? No one could win this game. The only logical conclusion that we come up with was that Mikey was already on a phone call.
I think that's very possible. I think that's probably more possible than the scenario I brought up, but nonetheless, these modern smartphones do have Google Assistant and do have Siri that could dial through verbal commands. It's possible. I don't think most people use their phones that way, and we haven't heard any explanation from this kid, but there is more than like one scenario to explain this that would be innocent. Just saying, just for clarity, I'm not saying I know what happened, but just to steel man this, and if I was his defense lawyer, this is something that could be brought up.
At 12:23 p.m. By 12:23 p.m. He was already on a phone call. So I said, let's go back a little earlier in the footage and see if we can find when he actually maybe dials onto the phone. Maybe we can see him pick up the phone and begin a call before the shot takes off. And then after beginning that call, if we're following this logic, that would mean he puts his phone down until Charlie gets shot. And we were able to find what we think could be that moment. And I can tell you that it is 1 minute and 45 seconds approximately before that shot goes off. And we can watch that here. You see Mikey's on his phone here. And you're going to see he pulls it up and he starts to cover his ear again. Now, that could be unrelated. Again, we're taking a guess here.
It could be unrelated, it could be him texting, but he pulls it up to listen to it. You can kind of see the hand reaching there as if something audible is happening that he wants to pay attention to. Could be even a YouTube video or something like that. We don't know without an explanation, but Candace could be right. He could be dialing a call, and he could be on a call live when he later picks it up to, you know, verbalize again. That could be the case. So this is eyebrow raising. Without an explanation, it's hard to discount this as a possible interesting avenue that might play into this whole thing. I haven't seen any attempt to connect him to either George Zinn or Tyler Robinson or any alternative shooter to try to connect Mike McCoy to any shooter. That hasn't happened, but either way, this is eyebrow raising, at least when it comes to this narrative and some things that might grab our attention and at least be worth pursuing, at least to the furthest possible extent we can.
That's what made the most sense to us because we couldn't justify it in any other way. And I want to be clear, we're not here to make assumptions, okay? And we wouldn't have to make any assumptions if Turning Point USA could just tell the truth. They could just be open and they could be honest about everything. Okay, I obviously went out to both Mikey McCoy and Andrew Colvett for a statement, asked those two questions. Hey, who were you on the phone with? What's going on here? No response. Weird. Because if that was me and I saw clips going viral and people were drawing conclusions from that clip, thinking that I was already on the phone, thinking that my reaction was weird, I would instantly hit back. I'd say, here's my call log. You want to know who I was on the phone with? 911, obviously. I was freaking out. I called 911. I didn't know what I was doing. Here's my phone. Here's my whole call log for that day.
That would be a reasonable way to respond to this thing, but all sorts of people respond to things like this differently. It doesn't mean that there's guilt or complicity in this Mike McCoy guy because he didn't respond that way. But nonetheless, if you want to, alleviate all, heads pointing your direction or thoughts pointing your direction and what kind of connections you might have to this, you'd think you'd want to be more forthcoming. Now, some people are more guarded about their privacy than others. That's their right too. There's nothing that says like this guy should be forced to hand over his phone records or account for this, but by not doing so, it only opens up new questions. So we'll see if we ever get any answers on this. But yeah, ideally, they should come clean on this. Turning Point USA should have an explanation for this if they don't want additional questions in this direction. And they've been raised for several days on the internet over this.
This is, I don't know. I guess we live in a world where that doesn't make sense. I would have issued a statement to dispel any rumors, but they have not. Here's what I want to say, and I honestly, I understand I'm preaching to the choir here. Everything about this is wrong. You know it, and I know it. It's strange to me. I think I'm a very direct person, and I say what I mean, and I do not want people to mistake what's happening right now or to wrongly assume my intentions here. So allow me to be very explicit, okay? I want war with all of you, okay? All of you. And there's a reason. I'm going to get to that reason in a little bit, but I want war with all of you. So write your articles, issue your statements, email the White House, reach out for comment, okay? Say whatever it is you want to say about me. I want war with all of you. Because I know this isn't right. And there is no way you are going to convince me and the rest of the world that all of this is normal.
Yeah, it's hard to discount this or hard to disagree with her, whether you think, declaring war on Turning Point USA is a productive avenue to getting more answers. I think it's an open question. It's very clear that some of the people around Charlie at Turning Point USA haven't been that forthcoming. Some of them have had to be because Candace rightly divulged the truth that Charlie, quote, said in that chat group, quote, "I have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause." That's literally what he said after, several weeks of them trying to lionize him as this pro-Israel martyr that went down as, the most fierce Israel first fanatic in the world, the biggest Zionist fanatic in the world. And his history was to support Israel. It was to be fiercely Zionist. But we saw in the last months of his life, he was facing pressures from pro-Zionist donors, questioning his integrity. He complained about that on the August 6th episode of the Megyn Kelly show. The fact that he couldn't even criticize Israel in minor ways, that his character was called into question, that he might just not be with them. The fact that he hosted Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith at the recent Turning Point USA event at that point, that didn't please pro-Zionist donors that don't want debates, they want Hasbara. There were pressures there. And he didn't want the war with Iran. He didn't want Trump to strike Iran, famously going to Trump and pleading with him not to do that, not to follow the neocons down that road to perdition and hell. That hellscape that comes from the U.S. foreign policy regime that's shoot first and ask questions later, and let's not even think about diplomacy. So that's true. Like I said, this is an interesting avenue. I think this is worthy of some attention to see what comes from this, what the McCoys might say about this. If they continue to be secretive about it, it's just going to raise more questions for the same reasons that when the feds are secret about, say, the Epstein scandal and the Epstein cover-up, that just raises more questions. It forces those questions to enter into like a permanent theory of the state and the worst possible angle and duplicity that the state could be engaging in. Same thing when it came to the JFK assassination, which Candace rightly referenced here. There's still open questions about that today, and it's because of the lack of transparency. So let's see what we have, but there are a few explanations that would cover for this outside of maybe using a non-dial verbal approach to dial or being on a call in advance. I mean, the latter of which is far more suspicious. If you're trying to, be on a call to confirm the shot, it shows possible foreknowledge here. And that's what is the most interesting thing to me. And until McCoy is forthcoming about this. We might never know, but I do applaud Candace and other people that have looked at this and at least assessed this or analyzed this and tried to seek answers for it. Ian Carroll as well. But I do want to hear what you think. Do you think this is an avenue worth investigating? Do you think there's something here? Do you think this is a nothing burger? What does this mean in the entire Charlie Kirk assassination narrative? And will we ever get answers about this portion of it? And what connection there might be to this and the actual shooting? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Candace Owens. I appreciate her. I don't always agree with all the facets of her investigation, but I think this one is worthy of thinking about, considering, analyzing, and actually investigating. Also, if you like this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. If you do that, I will greatly appreciate you and your support for my channel. So much so that I'll actually give you free access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. Also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below, or go to libertyvault.net, plug in your email, I'll send it right to you, no cost whatsoever. That tells the story about how the U.S., according to the founders and ratifiers, started out with a decentralized League of States where most political authority was supposed to reside in the localities, but how that system has been perverted into a centrally planned, centrally powerful world empire building scheme that every president in my lifetime has been complicit in. Check that out, and until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.